47-49. 2. 33 man who had not inaugurated newly built house or had not used newly planted vineyard. 20. 5, 6. Compare EC2. 24. 3. 12, 13 man who had become engaged and had not yet taken his wife. The newly married man continued exempt for 1 year. Man had the right to have heir and to see this heir. 20. 7. 24. 5 man who was fearful he would tend to break down morale of fellow soldiers. 20. 8. JG 7. 3 cleanliness was required in camp since soldiers were sanctified for warfare. 23. 9-14 No women were allowed as camp followers for sex relations. Relations with women were abstained from during campaign. This ensured religious and physical cleanliness. 15. 16. 1-21. 5. 2-11. 6-11 No raping of women among enemy was allowed, for it would be fornication. And no marriage with such women was permitted until campaign was over. This provided for religious cleanliness, and it also was an inducement for enemy surrender, for they would be assured that their women would not be molested. 21. 10-13 Military procedures against enemy cities. If city that was attacked belonged to one of 7 nations of land of Canaan mentioned at the 7. 1. All inhabitants were to be devoted to destruction. 20. 15-17. Jos 11. 11-14. 2. 32-34. 3. 1-7 If left in the land, these would be a danger to continued relationship of Israel with Jehovah God. He had let them live in land until their iniquity came to completion. GE 15. 13-21 For cities not belonging to the 7 nations, terms of peace would first be proclaimed. 20. 10-15 If city surrendered, inhabitants were put to forced labor. If they did not surrender, all males and all women not virgins were killed. Others were spared as captives. 20. 11-14. Compare New 31. 7, 17, 18. Killing all men removed danger of later revolt by city and also marriage of these men to Israelite women. These measures also helped to avoid phallic worship and diseases among Israelites. Trees producing food could not be cut down and used for works. 20. 19, 20 Chariots were burned. Horses otextoi acute muritra longo. Blood of slaughtered animal had to be poured out on ground like water and covered with dust. 17. 13. 12. 16 No animal dying of itself or found dead could be eaten because it was unclean and had not been properly bled. 14. 21 Only legal uses. Put upon altar for atonement. Used for prescribed cleansing purposes. 17. 11, 12. 12. 27. New 19. 1-9 Use of fat. No fat could be eaten. Fat belonged to Jehovah. 3. 16, 17. 7. 23, 24 Eating fat of offering brought death penalty. 7. 25 Slaughtered animals in wilderness. Any domestic animals that were to be slaughtered were to be brought to tabernacle. They would be eaten as communion sacrifices. 17. 3-6 Penalty for violation. Death. 17. 4, 8, 9 Wild clean animals caught in hunting could be killed on the spot. Blood had to be poured out. 17. 13, 14 After entering promised land, clean animals could be slaughtered for food in the place of a person's residence if he was far from the sanctuary, but blood had to be poured on ground. 12. 20-25 Animals, fish, insects permitted for food. Every creature that splits hoof, forming a cleft therein, and chews cud. 11. 2, 3. 14. 6 Everything in the waters that has fins and scales. 11. 9-12. 14. 9, 10 Insects and winged swarming creatures that go upon all fours and have leaper legs. Migratory locust, edible locust, cricket, and grasshopper all according to their kinds. 11. 21, 22 Animals, fish, birds, swarming creatures prohibited for food. Animals. Camel, rock badger, hare, Pegler 11. 4-8. The 14. 7, 8 fish and other swarming creatures in the water that have no fins or scales. 11. 10 birds and flying creatures. Eagle, osprey, black vulture, red kite, black kite, gold, raven, ostrich, owl, gull, falcon, little owl, long-eared owl, swan, pelican, vulture, cormorant, stork, heron, hoopoe, bat, any winged swarming creature that goes on all fours, that is, having locomotion in the manner of animals that walk on four legs. The factors determining which flying creatures were designated ceremonially unclean are not expressly stated in the Bible. While most of the unclean birds were birds of prey or scavengers, not all of them were. 14. 12-19. 11. 13-20. Seabirds and articles on individual birds swarming creatures on the earth. Mole rat, jerboa, lizard, gecko foundfoot, large lizard, newt, sand lizard, chameleon, any creature that goes upon the belly, on all fours style of locomotion, or on any great number of feet. 11. 29, 30, 42 animal that died of itself or was already dead or torn by wild beast. 17. 15, 16. 14. 21. X22. 31 animals presented as vow or voluntary offerings. Communion sacrifice could be eaten on day offered and on second but not on third day. Penalty for violation, death. Thanksgiving sacrifice to be eaten on that day. None to be saved over until morning second day. Passover must not be left over. What was not eaten was to be burned. 7. 16-18. 19. 5-8. 22. 29, 30. X12. 10 things causing uncleanness. Emission of semen, person had to bathe and was unclean until evening. 15. 16. 23. 10, 11 garment touched by semen was washed and was unclean until evening. 15. 17 husband and wife, after having intercourse, had to bathe and were unclean until evening. 15. 18 childbirth woman was unclean 7 days after bearing a male, plus 33 days first 7 days, unclean to all, as in menstruation. 33 days unclean only in relation to touching holy things such as sacrificial meals or coming into the holy place. 12. 2-4 if child was female, woman unclean 14 days, plus 66. 12. 5 woman's menstruation. 12. 2 woman unclean 7 days in regular menstruation. During entire period of abnormal or extended discharge of blood, plus 7 days. 15. 19, 25, 28 during otextoi acute urethra longo, person was quarantined 7 days and then examined. If plague had stopped, quarantine 7 more days. 13. 4, 5, 21, 26. If plague did not spread then, he was pronounced clean. 13. 6. If plague spread, it was leprosy. 13. 7, 8 if leprous, person had to have garments torn, let his head become ungroomed, cover over mustache or upper lip, call out unclean, unclean. Dwelt isolated outside camp until plague cured. 13. 45, 46. New 5. 2-4 genital discharge evidently due to diseased condition. 15. 2, 3 bed or articles that such a person would sit or lie on were unclean. 15. For anyone who touched the affected person, his bed, or whatever he was sitting on was unclean, or if affected person spat on another, he was rendered unclean. 15. 5-11 if touched by one having running discharge, earthenware vessels were smashed, wooden one was rinsed with water. 15. 12 after discharge stopped, person was unclean 7 days. 15. 13 cleanliness of military camp was safeguarded by requiring that excrement be deposited outside the camp and be covered over. 23. 12, 13 regulations concerning bodies of dead persons touching corpse, bone, or burial place of human made one unclean 7 days even when on open field. New 19. 11, 16 death for refusing to purify self. New 19. 12, 13 see cleansing procedure at New 19. 17-19 all who were in or came into tent containing dead person were unclean as was any opened vessel thereon which no lid was tied down. New 19. 14. 15 regulations concerning bodies of dead animals. The body of a clean animal that died of itself made the one who carried it, touched it, or ate it unclean. The dead body of any unclean animal made the one who touched it unclean. Cleansing was required. 11. 8, 11, 24-31, 36, 39, 40. 17. 15, 16 bodies of unclean animals would make items such as vessels, jar stands, ovens, garments, skins, and sackcloth unclean by contact. 11. 32-35 Spoil taken from city. Everything that could be processed with fire had to be so processed metals, then purified by water for cleansing. Other things had to be washed new. 31. 20, 22, 23 Other obligations involving fellow creatures. The law specified that you must love your fellow as yourself. 19. 18. Jesus indicated that it was the second greatest commandment in the law. Mount 22. 37-40 Towards fellow Israelites love was to be shown. Murder was forbidden. X 20. 13. Row 13. 9, 10 Must not take vengeance or hold a grudge against one's fellow man. 19. 18 Care for the poor. X 23. 6. 25. 35, 39-43 Care for widows and orphans. X 22. 22-24. 24. 17-21. 27. 19 Respect for property. Stealing was forbidden. Compensation was required. X 20. 15. 22. 1-4, 7 Wrongful desire for property and possessions belonging to one's fellow man was forbidden. X 20. 17 Consideration for the handicapped. Could not ridicule or call down evil upon deaf person. He could not defend himself against statements he could not hear. 19. 14 One who put an obstacle in the way of blind person or misled him was cursed. 19. 14. 27. 18 Toward alien residents. They were not to be mistreated. X 22. 21. 23. 9. 19. 33, 34. 10. 17-19. 24. 14, 15, 17. 27. 19 Toward slaves. Hebrew slave was released in 7th year of his or her servitude or at Jubilee year, whichever came first. During slavery, to be treated as hired laborer, with consideration. X 21. 2. 15. 12. 25. 10 If man came in with wife, she went out or was freed with him. X 21. 3 If master gave him a wife, evidently a foreigner, while he was in slavery, only he went free. If this wife had borne him children, she and children remained property of master. X 21. 4 On freeing Hebrew slave, master had to give him gift according to his ability to give. 15. O text to acute miritra longo. Law 220 Gentile tend to a house or eat with Gentiles without becoming religiously unclean. In fact, when Jesus was on earth, even entering a Gentile house or building was thought to make a Jew unclean. Joe 18. 28. Act 10. 28 The sanctity of life and the dignity and honor of the family, of marriage, of person, were protected. Additional effects, which could be considered incidental to the religious separation that the law covenant accomplished, were the health benefits in the protection from diseases common to the nations around the Israelites. The laws of moral cleanness, physical sanitation, and diet undoubtedly had a salutary effect when they were obeyed. But the real purpose of the law was, as stated by the Apostle Paul, to make transgressions manifest, until the seed should arrive. It was a tutor leading to Christ. It pointed to Christ as the objective, aimed at Christ as the end of the law. It reveals that all humans, including the Jews, are under sin and that life cannot be obtained by works of law. 3. 19-24. Row 3. 20. 10. For it was spiritual, from God, and holy. Row 7. 12, 14 at Ephesians 2. 15 It is called the law of commandments consisting in decrees. It was a standard of perfection, marking the one who could keep it as perfect, worthy of life. Law 18. 5. 3. 12. Since imperfect humans could not keep the law, it showed that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Row 3. 23. Only Jesus Christ kept it blamelessly. Joe 8. 46. Heb 7. 26. The law also served as a shadow of the good things to come, and things connected with it were typical representations, causing Jesus and the apostles to call upon it often to explain heavenly things and matters concerning Christian doctrine and conduct. Therefore, it provides an essential and necessary field of study for the Christian. Heb 10. 1. 9. 23. Jesus said that the whole law hung upon the two commandments, to love God and to love one's neighbor. Mount 22. 35-40. It is interesting that in the book of Deuteronomy, where the law was modified somewhat to govern Israel's new circumstances upon settling in the promised land, the Hebrew words for love, loved, and so forth, appear more than 20 times. The 10 words X 34. 28, or the 10 Commandments, were the basic part of the law, but were combined with about 600 other laws, all of which were of equal force and binding power upon the Israelites. Just 2. 10. The first 4 of the 10 Commandments defined man's relationship to God. The 5th, to God and to parents. And the last 5, to one's fellow man. These last 5 were named in apparent order of severity of harm done to one's fellow man. Murder, adultery, stealing, bearing false witness, and covetousness or selfish desire. The 10th commandment makes the law unique in comparison with the laws of all other nations in that it prohibits selfish desire, a command in reality enforceable only by God. It actually got at the cause of violation of all the other commandments. X 20. 2-17. The 5. 6-21. Compare F5. 5. Col 3. 5. Chas 1. 14, 15. 1 Joe 2. 15-17. The law contained many principles and guiding statutes. The judges were given latitude to investigate and consider motives and attitude of violators, along with the circumstances surrounding the violation. A deliberate, disrespectful, or unrepentant violator received the full penalty. New 15. 30, 31. In other cases a lighter judgment might be determined. For example, whereas a murderer was to be put to death without fail, an accidental manslayer could receive mercy. New 35. 15, 16. The owner of a bull that habitually gored people and that killed a man might die. Or the judges might impose a ransom. X 21. 29-32. The difference between a deliberate thief and a wrongdoer who voluntarily confess evidently accounts for the difference between the penalty stated at Exodus 22. 7 and that of Leviticus 6. 1-7. Law of conscience. The Bible shows this results from O text to a acute miritra longo, Law 221 to be a law to themselves, for their consciences cause them to be accused or even excused in their own thoughts. Row 2. 14, 15. Many just laws in pagan societies reflect this conscience, originally placed in their forefather Adam and passed down through Noah. See conscience. At 1 Corinthians 8. 7. The Apostle Paul says that lack of accurate Christian knowledge could result in a weak conscience. Conscience can be a good guide or a poor one, depending upon the knowledge and training of the individual. 1T1. 5. Heb 5. 14. One's conscience can be defiled and, therefore, can mislead. Tit 1. 15. Some, by constantly going contrary to conscience, cause it to become like insensitive scar tissue, and consequently no safeguard to follow. 1T4. 1, 2. Law of the Christ. Paul wrote, "Go on carrying the burdens of one another, and thus fulfill the law of the Christ." G 6. 2. While the law covenant was terminated at Pentecost, 33 CE, since the priesthood is being changed, there comes to be of necessity a change also of the law. Heb 7. 12. Christians come under law toward Christ. 1 Co 9. 21. This law is called the perfect law that belongs to freedom, the law of a free people, the law of faith. Chas 1. 25. 2. 12. Row 3. 27. Such a new law had been foretold by God through the prophet Jeremiah, when he spoke of a new covenant and the writing of his law on the hearts of his people. J 31. 31-34. Hajj 8. 6-13. Like Moses, the mediator of the law covenant, Jesus Christ is mediator of the new covenant. Moses wrote the law in code form, but Jesus did not personally put a law down in writing. He talked and put his law into the minds and hearts of his disciples. Neither did his disciples set down laws in the form of a code for Christians, classifying the laws into categories and subheadings. Nonetheless, the Christian Greek scriptures are full of laws, commands, and decrees that the Christian is bound to observe. Re 14. 12. 1 Joe 5. 2, 3. 4. 21. 3. 22-24. 2 Joe 4-6. Joe 13. 34, 35. 14. 15. 15. 14. Jesus gave instruction to his disciples to preach the good news of the kingdom. His command is found at Matthew 10. 1-42. Luke 9. 1-6. 10. 1-12. At Matthew 28. 18-20. A new command was given to Jesus' disciples to go, not to the Jews only, but to all nations, to make disciples and baptize them with a new baptism, in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all the things I have commanded you. Thus, with divine authorization Jesus taught and issued commands while on earth. Act 1. 1, 2 as well as after his ascension. Act 9. 5, 6. Re 1. 1-3. The entire book of Revelation consists of prophecies, commands, admonition, and instruction to the Christian congregation. The law of the Christ covers the whole course and scope of the Christian's life and work. By the help of God's Spirit the Christian can follow the commands in order to be judged favorably by that law, for it is the law of that Spirit which gives life in union with Christ Jesus. Row 8. 2, 4. Law of God. The Apostle Paul speaks of the Christian's fight as influenced by two factors, the law of God, or the law of that Spirit which gives life on one side and sin's law, or the law of sin and of death, on the other. Paul describes the conflict, saying that fallen flesh infected with sin is enslaved to sin's law. The minding of the flesh means death, but God, by sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh and concerning sin, condemned sin in the flesh. With the help of God's Spirit the Christian can win the fight. By exercising faith in Christ, putting to death the practices of the body, and living according to the Spirit's direction, and can gain life. Row 7. 21. 8. 13. Law of sin and death. The Apostle Paul argues that, because of the sin of mankind's father Adam, death ruled as king from Adam to the time of Moses, when the law was given, and that the law made do textui acute miritra longo. Law cover 222 was in the relationship of a wife to Jehovah as husband. Isra 54. 5, 6. J 31. 32. In patriarchal law the husband was the undisputed head of the family, the wife being in submission, though she could make recommendations subject to the husband's approval. GE 21. 8-14. Sarah called Abraham Lord. GE 18.